Most people spend their entire lives waiting for a miracle that never arrives. They look at the horizon, waiting for a promotion, a phone call, or a lucky break. But Carl Jung understood something that most would find terrifying. The world doesn't change until the lens you see it through shatters. And that shattering, it doesn't take decades. It doesn't take years. It takes one night. Imagine waking up tomorrow, and the weight that has been crushing your chest for 10 years is simply gone. Imagine the fear that has dictated your every move suddenly feels like a distant, powerless memory. Jung called this the great turn. It is the moment the ego finally exhausts itself, stops fighting the universe, and surrenders to the deeper intelligence of the self. Tonight, you aren't just watching another video. You are standing at the threshold of a psychological event horizon. You feel it, don't you? That restlessness. That feeling that the you've been pretending to be is finally breaking apart. Jung believed that when you reach the absolute limit of your suffering, the psyche performs a radical act of alchemy. It flips the poles. What was dark becomes light. What was stuck becomes fluid. This isn't about positive thinking. It's about a structural collapse of your old reality. In the next few minutes, we are going to walk through the 6 stages of this overnight transformation. By the time we reach the end, you won't just understand Jung's philosophy, you will realize that the one night he spoke of might actually be the one you are living through right now. To understand the night that is coming, you must first understand the structural lie you have been living. Carl Jung's most sobering discovery was that most people do not live their own lives. They live the life of a persona. The word persona literally translates from Latin as mask. In ancient theater, actors wore these masks to project a specific character. In your life, you have been wearing a mask for so long that you've forgotten your own face. But there is a law in the human psyche. The mask has a shelf life. You are currently entering a phase that Jung called the bankruptcy of the persona. This is the first, and perhaps most terrifying, sign that your one night is approaching. Think of your psyche as a massive energy grid. For years, you have been diverting 90% of your power to keep the simulation running. You've been powering the successful professional mask, the reliable parent mask, or the strong one mask. You've been taking out psychic loans to stay polite, to stay composed, and to stay socially acceptable. But on the eve of your transformation, the bank calls in the debt. Suddenly, the energy you used to have for the charade is gone. You wake up and find that you can no longer perform the emotions that used to come so easily. You find yourself in the middle of a social gathering, surrounded by people who know you, and you feel like a stranger in a foreign land. You look at the things you used to desire, the status symbols, the validation, the wins, and they feel like ash in your mouth. This is the total bankruptcy of the false self. Most people misinterpret this stage. They think they are entering a depression. They think they are losing it. They go to doctors and ask for a way to get back to normal. But Jung would tell you, normal was the sickness. The exhaustion you are feeling is actually a sacred strike. Your soul has decided it will no longer fund the lie. It has cut the power to the persona so that the energy can be redirected to the self, the part of you that has been starving in the dark for decades. This bankruptcy is a space-clearing operation. Imagine a room filled with old, broken furniture. Furniture that belongs to your parents, your exes, and your old teachers. You want to bring in a new life, but there is literally no room for it. The one-night shift requires a total liquidation of that old inventory. You have to reach a point where the old you is so hollow, so heavy, and so distasteful that you would rather face the abyss than spend one more minute pretending to be that person. This is why, as this night approaches, your mirror begins to break. The social mirror is the feedback you get from the world. For years, you've defined yourself by how others saw you. I am a good person because they say so. I am successful because I have the title. But as you approach the breaking point, the mirror starts to glitch. The compliments don't land anymore. The criticisms don't sting. You realize that the version of you that exists in other people's minds is a ghost that has nothing to do with your reality. Jung called this the collapse of the ego-self axis. Usually, the ego, the mask, is the center of your world. But on the night of the shift, the axis flips. The ego is demoted from master to messenger. This creates a terrifying sensation of unreality. You might feel like you are watching your life through a screen. You might feel a strange, cold apathy toward things that used to make you cry. Do not be afraid of this coldness. This is the winter of the soul that precedes the great spring. It is the necessary cooling of the emotions so that the psychological alchemy can take place. Think about the sheer physics of it. A diamond is not created by positive thinking. It is created by unbearable pressure and intense heat applied to coal in the dark. You are currently in the darkness stage. The pressure you feel, the feeling that your life is too small, the feeling that your skin is too tight, is the pressure of the diamond being formed. If you try to fix your life right now, you will fail. Why? because you are trying to fix a version of yourself that is already dead. You cannot repair a mask that is meant to be shattered. Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But he didn't tell you that the price of that privilege is the total destruction of who you thought you were. On the eve of this night, you have to accept your own bankruptcy. You have to stand in front of the universe and say, "I have nothing. I am nothing. I know nothing." In the modern world, we are taught that having nothing is a tragedy. In Jungian psychology, having nothing is the ultimate power. Because when you are finally bankrupt, you can no longer be blackmailed by the fear of losing anything. You can no longer be controlled by the opinions of others. You can no longer be seduced by the simulation. You are becoming untouchable. The night your life changes will not begin with a choir of angels. It will begin with a sovereign no. No more pretending. No more performing. No more waiting for permission. You will realize that the waiting room you've been sitting in for the last 10 years was never locked from the outside. You were holding the door shut from the inside because you were terrified of the nothingness on the other side. But on this night, the persona collapses under its own weight. The door swings open, and as you step into the darkness of the true self, you realize that the nothingness isn't an abyss, it's a vastness. If the first stage of this night was the bankruptcy of who you thought you were, this second stage is the descent into the place where your true power has been hiding in exile. Carl Jung called this the Nikia. It is an ancient term for a journey into the underworld, a night sea journey, where the ego must leave the shores of the known world and sink into the vast, dark waters of the unconscious. Most people spend their entire lives running from this darkness. They fill their rooms with noise, their minds with distractions, and their hearts with shallow comforts because they are terrified of what might happen if the lights finally went out. But on the night your life changes, the lights do go out. The social mirror is gone. The persona has collapsed, and you find yourself standing at the edge of an abyss that is not outside of you, but within you. This is the midnight of the soul. The Nikia is not a place of punishment. It is a place of retrieval. Jung understood that the modern human is fragmented. To survive childhood, to fit into society, and to endure the workplace, you had to cut off pieces of your soul. You cut off your rage because it was too dangerous. You cut off your wildness because it was too unpredictable. You cut off your deepest ambition because it made the people around you uncomfortable. You pushed these fragments into the shadow, and you locked the door. But on this night, the door is kicked open from the inside. As you begin your descent into the Nikia, you will encounter what Jung called the guardians of the threshold. These are the fears, the shames, and the monsters of your past that have been guarding the basement. To the old you, these were enemies to be avoided. But to the new you, they are allies in disguise. Think about the anxiety that has been keeping you awake. In the Nikia, you realize that this anxiety isn't a disorder. It is a messenger. It is the psychic energy of a warrior who has been given no war to fight. It is the vibration of a massive engine that is currently idling in a tiny garage. When you face the anxiety in the dark of this night, you stop trying to calm it down, and you start asking it, where do you want to go? This is the mind-blowing pivot. You don't heal your shadow, you integrate it. Jung famously said, "I'd rather be whole than good." This is a terrifying statement to the collective mind, but to the sovereign individual, it is the only path to freedom. To be good is to be a fragment, a polite, neutered version of a human being. To be whole is to have teeth. It is to possess the capacity for destruction so that you can protect what you create. On this night, you are reclaiming your teeth. As you descend deeper into the Nikia, you feel a heavy, crushing pressure. This is the psychological gravity of your own history. You are forced to look at the grave of your potential. You see the versions of yourself that you murdered so that you could fit in. You see the artist you abandoned, the adventurer you silenced, and the truth teller you gagged. It hurts. It is supposed to hurt. Jung believed that there is no coming to consciousness without pain. The pain you feel during this midnight descent is the growing pains of a soul that has been cramped in a tiny box for 20 years. You are stretching. You are expanding. You are breaking the internal shackles that were forged in the fires of your childhood. This is the alchemical stage of nigredo, the blackening. In alchemy, before the lead can become gold, it must be reduced to a prime matter. It must be dissolved, burnt, and turned into a black, formless mass. You are currently in the blackening. You feel like you are nothing. You feel like you are lost. But listen closely. Only the lost can be found. If you knew where you were, you would still be in the old simulation. Being lost in the Nikia is the highest form of navigation. It means you are no longer following the GPS of society. You are navigating by the stars of the self. In the deepest part of the night, you encounter the old wise one within. This isn't a person, but an archetype. an ancient intelligence that resides in the DNA of your psyche. It tells you the truth that the world has tried to hide. Your weakness was actually your sensitivity. Your failure was actually your rejection of a false path. Your loneliness was actually your initiation. You realize that you haven't been struggling for the last decade. You've been gestating. The one-night shift happens when you stop fighting the descent and you let yourself fall. You stop trying to stay positive, and you embrace the holy dark. You realize that the void you were so afraid of is not empty. It is pregnant with possibility. It is the womb of the universe. When you reach the bottom of the Nikia, you find the treasure hard to attain. It isn't a bag of gold or a success secret. It is your own authenticity. It is the incorruptible core of your being that remains after everything fake has been stripped away. You stand in the center of your own underworld, and you realize that the monsters are now bowing to you. Why? Because you are no longer pretending to be a victim. You have integrated the shadow. You have become the king or queen of your own darkness. The internal war has ended. The friction that was draining your life has disappeared. You are no longer a house divided. You are a monolith. By the time the clock moves toward the final hours of the night, the descent is complete. You have died to your old life, and you have retrieved the blueprints for your new one. You aren't going back to the world. You are going to re-enter the world as a stranger, a person who has seen the other side and no longer fears the surface. The Nikia has tempered you. It has turned your softness into iron. It has turned your confusion into conviction. The darkness hasn't changed, but your vision has. You can now see in the dark. And as you prepare for the great flip, you realize that the sun you are about to see rise isn't the same sun that set yesterday. It is the soul Niger, the black sun of the unconscious, finally rising into your conscious reality. You have survived the underworld. Now, watch what the underworld does when it finally gets a chance to walk in the daylight. For your entire existence, you have been tethered to a feedback loop. Since the moment you were born, you have looked into the mirrors of your parents' eyes, your teacher's grades, your peers' laughter, and your employer's metrics to find out who you are. Carl Jung observed that the average person is not a self, but a reflection. You have walked through the world constantly adjusting your frequency to match the expectations of the room. You've been an emotional chameleon, scanning faces for approval and measuring your worth by the likes, the nods, and the good job of people who are often just as lost as you are. But on the night your life changes, this mirror doesn't just crack, it evaporates. Jung understood that we spend our lives in a state of projection. We project our own unlived lives, our own fears, and our own hidden greatness onto other people. We make them our heroes to avoid the responsibility of our own power, or we make them our villains to avoid the confrontation with our own darkness. We give the world the power to make us feel a certain way. But tonight, you are calling your energy home. Imagine every person you've ever tried to please, every critic you've ever feared, and every ghost of an old authority figure. In the silence of this hour, see them standing there. For years, there have been invisible cords of energy running from your chest to theirs. You have been a battery powering their version of reality. You have been holding back your truth because you were afraid of the vibration it would cause in their mirror. On this night, you reach out and you sever the cords. One by one, they fall away. This is the sovereign shift. It is the moment you realize that the version of you that exists in your mother's mind, your boss's mind, or your followers' minds is not you. It is a two-dimensional cardboard cutout that they have decorated with their own needs and insecurities. You realize that you have been apologizing to cardboard. You have been trying to satisfy a ghost. A profound, chilling clarity settles over you. You realize that in the journey of the soul, you are the only one. This isn't a lonely realization. It is a sovereign one. Jung described the individual as someone who has successfully separated themselves from the collective psyche. The collective is the man of the crowd. The collective is the they. They say you should be married by 30. They say you should have a stable job. They say you should keep your head down and stay realistic. On this night, you finally ask the mind-blowing question, who is they? And you realize they are just a collection of frightened people, clutching their own masks, terrified that if they stop performing, the world will end. You realize that the system isn't a solid wall. It's a hologram. It only has power as long as you believe in the social mirror. As this realization takes hold, your waiting season ends. You stop waiting for a sign from the world that it's okay to be powerful. You stop waiting for a permission slip to be real. You understand that the waiting was just another form of hiding. You were waiting because you were afraid of the weight of freedom. Freedom is heavy. It means there is no one left to blame. If your life doesn't work, it's no longer because of your upbringing, your environment, or the economy. It's because you haven't yet claimed the sovereignty of the self. But on this night, you claim it. You look at the social mirror one last time and you see it for what it is. Prison built of glass. You realize that the only person you have ever needed to meet is the person who is currently sitting in your chair. The person who has survived every impossible day. The person who has kept the fire burning when the world tried to douse it with rationality and compliance. This is the point where you stop being a consumer of reality and you become a creator of reality. When you walk out of your room after this night, the people in your life will notice a change. They won't be able to put their finger on it. You might look the same, you might speak the same words, but the weight behind your presence will be different. You will have what Jung called mana, a spiritual authority that comes from being undivided. When you are no longer looking for validation, you become unmanipulatable. You become a glitch in the social simulation. People will try to pull you back into your old role. They will try to trigger your old guilt, your old shame, and your old people-pleasing reflexes. But the cords are gone. Their words will pass through you like ghosts. You have moved from the periphery of your life to the center. You no longer ask, what do they want from me? You ask, what does the self require of me? This is the point of no return. Once you have experienced the freedom of the broken mirror, you can never go back to the glass cage. You would rather be hated for who you are than loved for who you aren't. Because the love given to a mask doesn't reach the soul. It just stays on the surface, feeding the ego while the heart starves. Tonight, the starvation ends. You are feasting on your own authenticity. You are realizing that your weirdness, your intensity, and your refusal to fit in weren't defects. They were your identifiers. They were the unique signal that the universe was trying to broadcast through you. The silence of the night is no longer empty. It is full. It is vibrating with the potential of a human being who has stopped asking for permission to exist. You are standing in the middle of your own kingdom, and for the first time you are wearing the crown. But the one night isn't over yet. The mirror is broken. The shadow is integrated, and the persona is bankrupt. Now, the laws of the universe itself begin to bend. You are approaching the moment where the stuckness of your past turns into the inertia of your future. The air in the room feels different now, thicker, charged with a static electricity that you haven't felt since you were a child. This is the enantiodromia, the law of the great flip. The extreme of your waiting is about to become the extreme of your arriving. You aren't hoping for change anymore. You are witnessing it. As the night moves into the early hours of the morning, you reach a point where the laws of human logic seem to dissolve, replaced by a much older, much more powerful law of the psyche. Carl Jung called it enantiodromia. It is a term derived from the philosophy of Heraclitus, meaning that everything sooner or later turns into its opposite. This is the mind-blowing mechanism behind the overnight shift. It is the reason why the darkest hour is always just before the dawn. Not as a comforting cliché, but as a mathematical necessity of the soul. Think about the sheer tension you have been carrying. For years, you have been pushed to the extreme of stuckness. You have been at the extreme of silence, at the extreme of waiting, and at the extreme of suppression. In the Jungian universe, the psyche is a self-regulating system, much like a pendulum. The further you pull a pendulum to the left, the more potential energy you are creating for its swing to the right. Most people spend their lives trying to hold the pendulum in the middle. They try to stay moderate, safe, and balanced. But you have been pulled so far to the extreme of suffering that the string is about to snap. And when it snaps, the reversal isn't slow. It is instantaneous. This is the great flip. This is the moment in the night where your hopelessness reaches such a concentrated mass that it literally implodes into its opposite. Jung observed that when a psychological state reaches its absolute limit, it can no longer sustain itself. It must undergo a phase shift. Like water turning into steam at the exact moment of 100 degrees, or carbon turning into diamond under the final pound of pressure. The you that was defined by lack is suddenly, violently transformed into a you defined by abundance. You might feel this as a sudden, inexplicable quiet in your chest. The voices of anxiety that have been screaming for a decade suddenly go mute. Why? Because they have nothing left to say. They have reached the end of their script. In this void, a new frequency begins to pulse. This is the physics of the soul. You realize that the resistance you've been fighting wasn't an obstacle. It was fuel. Every no you ever received, every door that was slammed in your face, and every night you spent in tears was actually psychic capital being stored in a celestial bank account. On this night, the account is finally unlocked. The one-night transformation is a currency exchange. You are trading in your suffering for sovereignty. But you must understand, the flip only happens if you stay in the room. Most people flee the extreme. When the tension becomes too much, they distract themselves. They go back to the social mirror. They numb